Today on RoxomTV News, the President of the United States now has disclosed Bitcoin exposure on a federal ethics filing because nothing says drain the swamp like the swamp quietly going long on Michael Saylor's strategy. The Council of Europe plans to prosecute Vladimir Putin, a trial Russia will not attend, acknowledge, or honor. U.S. lawmakers move forward on Bitcoin with the Clarity Act passing a major hurdle. Gavin Newsom spends millions handing free tablets to California inmates in the name of digital equity. And two professors argue if it's morally obligatory to engineer ticks that give humans a permanent meat allergy. I'm your host, Hank Hudson. Bitcoin's currently trading around $79,000. And that brings us to our top stories of the morning. So let's get into it. Because today is the day Jerome Powell officially hands over the keys to the most powerful financial institution on the planet. His term as chair of the Federal Reserve ends. Kevin Warsh was confirmed by the Senate earlier this week, and he will be taking the gavel. Now, before we look forward, Federal Reserve reporter Howard Schneider takes us back through what was, by any measure, one of the strangest chairmanships in Fed history under the leadership of Powell. Take a look.
Jerome Powell's tenure as Fed chair comes to a close Friday, and what's distinguished him perhaps most of all from his predecessors is just how public-facing he's had to be throughout it. There was COVID-19. This forced the Fed into a dramatic expansion of its presence in the economy, had Powell going on 60 Minutes to explain, we will be there, we will do what's necessary to keep this economy afloat throughout this. And then there was the inflation that followed it, and this forced him into another mold, that of saying, listen, we will fix this, and in a sense take the heat for letting inflation get out of control in the first place. He was appointed to the role by President Trump, pretty quickly ran into conflict with the president.
He's terrible.
It started with words. Trump has been berating him, calling for rate cuts, calling him an enemy of the people.
3.1 billion, it went up a little bit or a lot.
It eventually morphed into a legal assault as well. Trump tried to fire one of Powell's colleagues. And then there was a criminal investigation of Powell himself.
This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure.
That's one aspect of his chairmanship that really kept him in the public eye. Powell has met more lawmakers and more often with members of the Senate than any of his predecessors. And that has probably stood him in good stead when it came to sort of resisting some of these efforts by Trump to erode the Fed's independence and really try to fire him from the board. Trump's appointee to succeed Powell, Kevin Warsh, was held up in the Senate until that investigation got dropped.
Let's get Warsh in there and do that by eliminating a bogus investigation that started this whole drama.
Kevin Warsh has had his nomination approved by the Senate. He's got an immediate problem with inflation. Numbers that have been coming out over the last few months really have not supported the narrative that inflation would peak because of tariffs and oil prices. So far from being able to cut rates, as President Trump still says he expects, and he may face some growing sentiment among his colleagues to begin indicating that they may actually have to raise interest rates.
Right. Now, unlike Powell, Warsh has been openly arguing for years that the Fed lost its credibility after a long run of aggressive balance sheet expansion and one market intervention after another. During his confirmation process, he repeatedly called for regime change at the Fed, signaling a shift toward a framework more focused on interest rates and less dependent on the kind of large-scale asset purchases that defined the last 2 decades. And here's where it gets interesting for our audience. Warsh has taken a notably different stance on Bitcoin and digital assets than just about any other modern central banker. He has previously called Bitcoin an important asset and a very good policeman for policy, arguing that the price of Bitcoin actually reflects market confidence in how the Fed is managing the dollar. And in another clip now circulating online, Warsh said, "If you're under 40, Bitcoin is your new gold." That is the sentence that has Bitcoiners paying close attention today because the man saying it is no longer a commentator on the sidelines. He is now the most powerful central banker in the world. President Donald Trump's latest federal ethics filing dropped a small but interesting detail. His family trust purchased shares of Strategy in transactions valued between $50,000 and $100,000. The filing lists multiple Strategy transactions tied to Trump's trust structure, both purchases and sales of MSTR shares. An important caveat here, the filing does not necessarily mean Trump personally pulled the trigger on these trades. Reuters noted the asset sits inside a trust managed by his children, and the filing itself doesn't specify who actually is making the investment calls. But the signal here is hard to ignore. Strategy has effectively become Wall Street's biggest Bitcoin accumulation machine. The company currently holds more than 818,000 Bitcoin on its balance sheet, making it the largest corporate BTC treasury in the world. For Bitcoin markets, this is one more sign the asset is moving deeper into the political, regulatory, and institutional mainstream, and the people writing the rules increasingly have skin in the game. The Council of Europe just did something it has not done since the 1940s. It formally set up a special tribunal, Nuremberg-style, to prosecute Vladimir Putin and the top of the Russian state for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Now, the crime of aggression is the part that makes this different from anything that's happened at the International Criminal Court so far. Aggression is a leadership crime. It doesn't attach to the soldiers carrying out orders. It attaches to the people in actual control of the aggressor state. The president, the prime minister, the foreign minister, the senior military commanders calling the shots. Russian central bank reserves have been frozen in European custody since 2022, and those reserves will eventually be litigated against. And the real question is whether this actually deters anyone. Does the threat of a future tribunal change the math for the next leader weighing a war of choice? Or is this just paperwork, a slow motion consequence that arrives long after the damage is done and the regime is gone? Russia got what it wanted on the battlefield, the tribunal gets what it wants on paper, and history will decide which one mattered more. Somewhere on the internet right now, Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, is refusing to shake Benjamin Netanyahu's hand at the UN while wearing a Palestinian flag scarf. Except she didn't. In fact, she never did. That moment never happened, but millions of people have already seen it. The fake comes to us out of Italy, where the Prime Minister is now spending part of her week explaining that videos of her own face are not, in fact, her own face. 2 AI-generated clips have been making the rounds. In the first one, Meloni dramatically snubs Netanyahu at a UN session. Let's take a look. Oh man, how are you going to do Bibi like that? Now in the second one, she throws papers and walks out of a meeting. Take a look.
Netanyahu, questo massacro deve finire. Il mondo non può più tacersi poco seguente e questo non mi fare serve a niente. Me ne vado, continuerò a lottare per la Palestina.
Whoa, George, aspetta.
That's a spicy Italian meatball. Now, Meloni denounced the videos directly, warning that deepfakes are a dangerous tool because they can deceive, manipulate, and strike anyone. The real diplomatic picture is messier than the fakes, but considerably less cinematic. Italy declined in April to renew its 5-year defense agreement with Israel, but it also joined Germany in rejecting EU calls to suspend the bloc's broader cooperation agreement. So the relationship is cooling, not collapsing on a camera in a hallway. And fake videos like this are now part of how foreign policy actually plays out. I hate to say it. Some random guy with a laptop can cook up footage of one world leader insulting another, push it into the right corners of the internet, and the damage is done before anyone fact checks any of it. Markets move, people get angry, governments start scrambling. These deepfakes aren't covering diplomacy anymore. In fact, they're shaping it. Every tool a government uses to communicate, the handshake, the official statement, the big speech, can now be faked for basically nothing and flipped to say the opposite of what actually happened. Which means the only way to know what a leader really said is to watch them say it live on their own feed in real time. Turns out the hardest thing for a government to defend in 2026 is the face of the person running it. Moving on. Oh, this one's wild. This next story is out of California, and it sounds like a parody headline, except it is all too real. Governor Gavin Newsom's administration approved a $189 million contract to hand out digital tablets to every inmate in the state prison system, including the men on death row. The pitch was digital equity for justice-impacted individuals, with inmates supposedly using the devices to contact family and take classes. A new report from the New York Post lays out what the tablets are actually being used for, and dozens of death row inmates admitted it on the record. Prisoners are using the tablets to, surprise, surprise, watch porn and have explicit sexual conversations with people on the outside, and, in some cases, groom minors. Great. The darkest case, a man convicted of sex crimes against a 12-year-old girl who then allegedly used his tablet to contact that same victim. A former deputy director of California's parole operation said the case is only the tip of the iceberg, and Newsom has given no indication he plans to reverse course. All right, guys, this one is interesting. I mean, I'm open to the argument that American prisons are too punitive and that real rehabilitation is more humane than what we've seen going on here for the last 50 years. But there is a very long distance between rehabilitation and giving a convicted child predator the technical means to contact his 12-year-old victim from inside the prison that is supposed to be keeping her safe from him. This is a governor who decided the optics of compassion matter more than basic public safety. And the people paying the price are the next victims who do not yet know the call is going to come from inside the prison. Come on, Newsom, get it together. I live here. All right, we're taking a break here at RoxomTV News. But when we're back, we got more of today's top stories underway. So stay tuned. We'll be returning right after this. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. The U.S. Senate Banking Committee just did the thing crypto has been waiting on for years. They advanced the Clarity Act. After a long markup session covering digital asset market structure, stablecoin rules, and how crypto businesses get regulated in this country, the committee officially advanced the bill. And while the hearing covered the entire digital asset industry, a few Bitcoin moments quickly spread across social media. Senator Cynthia Lummis defended Bitcoin as a tool for financial freedom, arguing the technology gives people more control over their money regardless of where they live or what government they live under.
It provides a level playing field regardless of whether you live in Rwanda or Queens, New York, about transmitting money faster and cheaper. It provides a woman who's trying to get out of a battered, miserable marriage the opportunity to walk away with her money in her head. It provides people who are being tortured in foreign countries the opportunity to walk away from that country with their money in their head because Bitcoin can be memorized. This is an innovation that provides individual freedom, individual savings. It is faster, cheaper, it is secure, and we're inviting that consumer environment into our country.
Thanks, Cynthia. Now, Lummis also made the case that the U.S. financial system is heading toward digital assets, whether anyone likes it or not.
There are 3 states that already allow banks to do this. One is Virginia, Wyoming, Louisiana. And after this bill passes, other states will allow it to do it. The bank permissibility language in our legislation does one thing. It simply confirms that banks can use digital assets to conduct activities that they already allow to perform by law. The US dollar is going to be digitized. It is going to be a digital asset.
Senator Angela Alsobrooks also defended digital asset innovation during the hearing, arguing younger generations see the technology as a path toward economic opportunity and long-term wealth creation.
Senator Alsobrooks.
I'd like to say a few words on the bill. The digital revolution is upon us, and it has presented a clear opportunity to support small businesses, generate wealth, and I believe spur innovation. And the truth is this digital revolution is happening with us or without us. Whether or not we regulate it to create the rules of the road or not, it is here. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and she and her peers have made it abundantly clear to me that they are interested in this innovation, that they believe that the digital revolution is important, and they want not only to be able to participate in it safely, but they want what every American wants: true and growing economic opportunity, the opportunity to become wealthy, to have generational wealth. And so that is why I am at the table.
Senator Tim Scott also chimed in, saying the bill is an opportunity play designed to expand access, encourage innovation, and support everyday Americans rather than protecting the financial old guard.
This legislation does not take sides between traditional finance and new technology, or Republicans and Democrats. It takes the side of everyday Americans. It brings digital assets out of the shadows and into a system that is safer, fairer, and more transparent. This is what good governance looks like. Today, we take a step forward together to protect investors, grow our economy, and keep America leading the world.
Scott also argued digital assets could lower costs and open financial doors for people the traditional banking system has historically ignored.
As a kid who grew up in poverty, the thing that attracts me to this issue the most is democratization, an opportunity to lower prices, create access points that today does not exist. This ought not be about Republicans and Democrats. It ought not be about who's on which side of the aisle or whether you agree with what we've done. This should be about the American people and nothing else. I want single mothers like the one that raised me to have more opportunities, more access at a lower price. And so we will disagree on this today. But I hope that what we end up with is a legislative product that is good now and gets another bite at the apple as it heads to the floor.
One of the lighter moments came from Senator Bernie Moreno, who joked about paying his taxes in Bitcoin years ago.
In 2016, I became the first person in the United States of America to pay my taxes with Bitcoin to show the capabilities of the technology. Had I met the senator from Rhode Island, I would not have done that, as I paid $3,000 in taxes with 2 Bitcoin. So I would absolutely be in a better spot had I not done that. So we should have met each other back then.
I do want to make a note that the $3,000 that you use for the Bitcoin would today be worth how much?
Too soon.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that point was clear.
Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren warned the legislation could blow up the economy, continuing her long-running campaign against the crypto industry.
The bill is set to unleash unregulated crypto upon our economy. It would also increase leverage across a range of different asset classes and regulatory regimes. I appreciate that Amendment 115 takes some steps toward protecting consumers from the havoc of this new regime, but it is not enough. The amendment further seems to remove SIPC protections from accounts with crypto, which highlights one of the real paradoxes in this bill. It pushes more of the market into crypto and removes protections for investors and removes recourse for victims. That is the wrong direction to go in.
All right.
When this blows up at the economy, I hope everybody remembers
Mr. Chairman.
Many of Warren's proposed amendments were voted down on the spot during markup, which tells you a lot about where the momentum actually sits inside that committee right now. The Clarity Act now moves deeper into the Senate process, where lawmakers will keep negotiating over stablecoin rules, the SEC versus CFTC jurisdiction fight, and broader digital asset oversight. But for markets, the bigger signal is still the one underneath all of it. Congress is no longer debating whether Bitcoin and digital assets belong in the U.S. financial system. They're debating how. The U.S. Commerce Department just greenlit NVIDIA to sell its second most powerful AI chip, the H200, to 10 Chinese companies. Now, each approved buyer can purchase up to 75,000 chips, either directly from NVIDIA or through U.S.-approved middlemen. There's just one small problem, though. Nobody's ordering. You see, the Chinese government is reportedly worried that any H200 chip routed through U.S. territory, which is required so Washington can collect its 25% tariff cut on every sale, might come with hidden vulnerabilities baked in. On top of that, Beijing has been pushing local companies hard to prop up the homegrown chip industry. And the timing of all of this is kind of hard to miss. The clearance dropped right at the political peak of NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang's full court press to keep China in his customer base. Huang flew with President Trump to Beijing this week for the Xi summit, and he spent months telling Washington that export restrictions are basically handing the Chinese AI market to Huawei and Cambricon on a silver platter. Both governments are now negotiating, and whoever controls the chip flow controls who gets to train the next generation of frontier AI models. And the factory that was supposed to be the crown jewel of American manufacturing just had its filing cabinet posted on the dark web. You see, Hun High Precision Industry, better known as Foxconn, confirmed that a ransomware crew breached its Northern American operations and forced a temporary shutdown of production lines in Wisconsin. The group behind it is called Nitrogen, posted on its leak site that it walked away with 8 terabytes of data and more than 11 million internal documents, including confidential project files tied to Apple, Intel, Google, Nvidia, and Dell. Foxconn said its cybersecurity team activated the response mechanism and that affected factories are gradually coming back online. Now, the Wisconsin site has its own story, and it's worth remembering. It started back in 2017 as the signature manufacturing announcement of Trump's first term, a promised $10 billion LCD panel plant, and was projected to create 13,000 jobs. But the LCD plant, well, it never quite materialized. What did show up eventually was something quieter, but arguably more important: a base for high-end server production and AI infrastructure assembly. You see, as of late 2025, Foxconn had sunk $2 billion into the site and put 1,500 people to work there. That is the facility now sitting in the middle of this breach. Nitrogen itself is a Conti-derived ransomware family that's been active since 2023, and researchers have flagged something grim about it. A bug in its encryptor means even paying the ransom may not get the locked files back. The dump, if it is in fact authentic, contains technical drawings for products from the most valuable companies on Earth. Apple, Nvidia, Google, and Dell have all declined to comment on the story. And the real story here is the centralization. You see, the most ambitious tech roadmaps on the planet are flowing through a single contract manufacturer. And that manufacturer's North American AI plant just had its directory tree listed for sale. When the supply chain runs through one server room, that server room is the supply chain. And somewhere right now, the next 11 million documents are already being inventoried. And Google wants to put AI computers in space, and it's talking to SpaceX about how to get them up there. You see, Alphabet is in discussions to use SpaceX rockets to launch prototype satellites for something called Project Suncatcher. Sounds cool. The plan is an 81 satellite cluster, a full kilometer wide, with Google's own tensor processing units on board, all linked together with optical lasers. Cool. Now, 2 prototypes are scheduled to launch by 2027. Google is also talking to other launch providers, but it is worth remembering that Alphabet just put $900 million into SpaceX in 2015, so they already have skin in the game. The pitch is power and politics. You see, solar panels work without stopping in low Earth orbit. There is no power grid to fight with, no aquifer to drain, no county zoning boards to beg for a permit. SpaceX is selling investors on space as the cheapest place to put AI compute, right ahead of an IPO that some analysts think could value the company near $1.75 trillion this year. Anthropic signed with SpaceX last week to use compute from xAI's Memphis facility, with the option to eventually extend the partnership into orbit. And the math right now still favors data centers on the ground once you add up construction and launch costs, but the direction those costs are heading is what investors are actually betting on. And the losers here, gang, well, they're local. If orbit becomes a real place to put AI workloads, the small American towns that have been counting on data center jobs are going to drown. But the winner, weirdly, is the environment. Orbital data centers run on uninterrupted sunlight, dump their heat into the vacuum, drain no rivers, and burn no coal. We may be about to find out whether saving rivers is worth losing factory towns, and that is a fight nobody in Washington seems to have a plan for. We're going to take a break here, but when we return, we got more of today's top news stories coming up on RoxomTV News. And then in our second hour, we're going to be joined by RoxomTV's own Walker America to make sense of all the madness. So stay tuned. We got a lot of show left for you this morning, and we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. Explosions rocked Bolivia's capital as demonstrators clashed with police in the streets. Protesters marched demanding the resignation of President Rodrigo Paz as the country wrestles with its worst monetary crisis in 40 years. Paz was elected just last fall on a platform of economic reform. The current conflict kicked off earlier this week when he repeated a long-standing gas subsidy that triggered immediate fuel shortages at the pump. Protesters are also demanding the repeal of a law that opens indigenous and peasant land to corporate development, plus a 20% bump to the minimum wage. The government has publicly said the president is not stepping down, Annual inflation, meanwhile, hit 14% in April, the highest reading since the mid-1980s. And there are currently 67 active roadblocks across the country choking off food and fuel deliveries to the capital. And this, gang, this is what happens when a government runs out of road. Bolivia spent 15 years financing a parallel reality through gas subsidies, and the central bank couldn't actually afford them. And the bill is now arriving all at once in the form of price shock and political collapse in the streets. There is no version of economic policy that produces 14% inflation, the end of fuel subsidies, and a 20% wage hike all in the same quarter. Something's got to break here, and for every other government still kicking the same can down the road, Bolivia is the warning shot. The longer you put off the pain, the uglier it gets when it finally shows up. The bolivar, the peso, the lira, and the rand are all watching this very, very closely. And the Iran war is now reaching all the way into the snack aisle of a Tokyo convenience store. You see, Calbee, Japan's biggest chip company, is stripping the color out of 14 of its flagship snack bags because the war has choked the global supply of an ingredient used in printing ink. Starting May 25th, potato chips, shrimp chips, and a dozen other staples are going to land in Japanese coin bins in monochrome packaging. No orange bag, no yellow chip illustration, no mascot, just black and white type that looks like somebody printed it on a fax machine. The first wave of the war hit fuel prices, shipping insurance, and treasury balance sheets, and that was the part everybody covered. The second wave is now showing up, and it's weirder and a lot harder to predict. Fertilizer shortages are hitting Asian rice farms. India has canceled rice exports to the Middle East. And air cargo that used to fly through Doha and Dubai without anyone noticing is now delayed or rerouted entirely. A Tokyo potato chip bag sits somewhere around the 4th or 5th layer down from the original shock, which tells you how far this thing has traveled. Two professors at Western Michigan University have published a peer-reviewed paper arguing that it is morally obligatory to engineer ticks that spread a permanent meat allergy to human beings. No. The paper is called Beneficial Blood Sucking. It was written by two professors of medical ethics. Their argument, when you strip it down, is pretty simple. If eating meat is morally impermissible, then preventing the spread of a disease that forces people to stop eating meat is also morally impermissible. Therefore, releasing the ticks is the ethical move here. Okay. They call it tick-borne alpha-gal syndrome a moral bioenhancer. And they propose gene editing the ticks to spread the allergy into cities, and they compare the release to vaccination by arguing that the bug bite infringes on bodily autonomy rather than violates it. So the distinction they are drawing in their actual words is that the needle is being delivered by an insect instead of a government official. The CDC already estimates that up to 450,000 Americans have alpha-gal syndrome. Cases have surged roughly 100 times over in the past decade, and there is no cure for it once you have it. Now, this is kind of a silly story here, gang. The usual response to a paper like this is to wave it off as a kind of thought experiment, and fine, I'll give it that for a second. The harder question, though, is when an academic paper stops being a thought experiment and starts being cover for something somebody else has actually decided they want to do. If a foreign government was caught designing a tick to give Americans a permanent allergy to beef, we would call it an act of war and roll the tanks. If a random guy in a basement was caught doing it, we would call it bioterrorism, and the FBI would be at his door before lunch. But when two tenured professors at a Michigan University published the exact same idea in a peer-reviewed journal and call it moral bioenhancement, we are apparently supposed to call it scholarship and let them keep tenure. I'm not buying it. The word on the cover changed. The thing inside the paper did not. We're going to take a break, but when we're back, more of today's top stories coming up on RoxomTV News, and we'll be jumping into our second hour in just a bit. We will be welcoming two special guests to the show, so stay tuned. A lot more underway right here after this. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. We got some more world news underway as Turkey and Qatar are now in talks to join the defense pact that Saudi Arabia signed with Pakistan last September. Now, if this actually goes through, you would have a brand new security bloc with nuclear weapons, a NATO member, and the world's biggest natural gas exporter all on the same team, and none of it runs through Washington. Pakistani troops are already stationed inside Saudi Arabia. Turkey would bring NATO ties and a standing army of 350,000 soldiers. Qatar would bring the money and the largest U.S. airbase in the entire Middle East. Now, Gulf states have spent 10 weeks watching America fight Iran while shipping through the Hormuz Strait collapsed to almost nothing, and maritime insurers refused to cover the route at all. They have appeared to look at the math and decided that being protected by Washington costs more than it pays right now. So they are building their own thing. And gang, this is what it looks like when a world order falls apart. For 70 years, the deal has been pretty simple. The Gulf sells the oil, the U.S. Navy guards the boats, and the dollar gets recycled back into treasury bonds. That whole arrangement is being quietly renegotiated by everybody except us. Strive Asset Management announced something that has never been done in American capital markets before. Starting June 16th, the company's preferred Bitcoin treasury security, called SATA, will start paying dividends every single trading day, which works out to roughly 250 payouts a year and makes it the first U.S.-listed security in history to do that. The announcement came during a company update on Strive's growing Bitcoin treasury strategy. Take a look.
Today is the biggest day in Strive's history, and I believe this sets the stage for the next decade of Bitcoin interfacing with capital. Let me start with a story. In 1610, the Dutch East India Company paid the first recorded cash dividend in history. The payments were irregular. Sometimes they were years apart. Sometimes they were paid in spices. And that was the standard for 359 years. Then, in 1969, Realty Income Corporation innovated. They moved to pay a dividend every month. And they still pay a dividend every month today. Realty Income is still trading today under the ticker O. It is a member of the S&P 500, and it is currently valued around $57 billion. Since then, monthly and quarterly dividends, or less, have been the standard for 57 years. And last month, Strategy announced a proposed move to semi-monthly dividends. And today, innovation strikes again. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Jeff. Today, I am proud to announce that SATA will be the first listed security in U.S. capital markets history to pay daily dividends. Yes, daily.
CEO Matt Cole said SATA will hold a 13% annual percentage rate through June 2026 while it shifts over to the daily payout schedule. And he also revealed that Strive is now holding over 15,000 Bitcoin worth roughly $1.2 billion. Chief Risk Officer Jeff Walton separately posted that Strive has officially retired its remaining $10 million convertible bond, which means the company is now completely debt-free and heading into the launch. And the bigger story here is how fast Bitcoin treasury companies are changing what they actually do. The original playbook was pretty simple. You buy Bitcoin, you hold it, sit on it, and let the stock chart do the talking. But what is happening now is something different, where companies are building real financial products on top of their Bitcoin stack that are designed to compete head-to-head with traditional income investments like bonds and dividend stocks. So instead of selling Bitcoin to pay investors, they are engineering securities around their holdings so the yield comes from somewhere else while the underlying Bitcoin exposure stays intact. Strive also pointed out that ASST is still the only public Bitcoin treasury company doing this with preferred shares instead of piling on regular corporate debt. And now, with SATA set to start paying out every trading day on June 16th, the company is saying it will still be the first in history to do that. Whether the rest of Wall Street follows them into this corner of the market is the open question, but Strive is already there. A guy on X spent 11 years locked out of his Bitcoin. Nightmare. This week, he got back in, though, and the assist came from an AI model going through the digital equivalent of his college junk drawer. The user, who goes by CPRKRN, says he regained access to a long dormant wallet after feeding files from an old college computer into Anthropic's Claude. His reaction, posted in real time, did not exactly read like a press release, saying, "Holy fucking shit, OMG, Claude just cracked this shit," he wrote. Tried like 7 million passwords. Now, before anyone panics, Claude did not crack Bitcoin. It did not break a seed phrase. Bitcoin's cryptography is exactly as intact today as it was yesterday. What actually happened is more boring and honestly more useful. Weeks earlier, @CPRKRN had found an old mnemonic phrase scribbled in a notebook. The problem was he had no idea which wallet it belonged to. So, last-ditch effort dumped my whole college computer into Claude, he wrote. It found an old wallet file that the mnemonics successfully decrypted. The password reportedly turned out to be LOL 420 fuck the police exclamation point smiley face. A password that in retrospect really should not have taken 11 years and an AI model to surface. The story quickly spread because it points at something genuinely interesting. The network was never the problem, and self-custody was also never the problem. The problem was a guy and a hard drive, and AI turned out to be pretty good at being a very patient archaeologist for both. And after recovering the funds, our newly liquid Bitcoiner tagged electronic music artist deadmau5 with one final request saying, please play at my wedding next year. I can afford you now, but hook it a little, maybe I'm just a guy. A man, a mnemonic, and a dream. Love it. Wait to hear those kinds of stories. All right, we're taking a break here at RoxomTV News, but when we're back, we're jumping into hour 2 of today's programming. We're going to be joined by fellow Roxom host Walker America, and in just a bit, Fernando, the Bitcoin Libertarian, will also be joining us to help us make sense of all today's top stories. And before we go to break, now is a good time as any. If you haven't already done the thing, I'm going to ask that you like, follow, and subscribe to RoxomTV, RoxomTV News, and me at Hank at RoxomTV. If you enjoy this type of content, you can find more of it there and watch it whenever you want, even when we're not live. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with our second hour of RoxomTV News coming up after this. All right, boys and girls, welcome back to RoxomTV News. We apologize for the delay there. I think we were having some residual effects from Y2K, but we got it sorted out. And joining me for the second hour of fun here at RoxomTV News, Roxom's own co-host, Walker America, is joining us. Walker, happy Friday. Always great to see you. How are you? Yeah.
Given some live commentary on the Senate Banking Committee's review of the Clarity Act yesterday. Got some follow-ups on that here today as it moves forward. Are we ready to kick things off?
I think so. I'm ready to hear more about what's going on with that Banking Committee meeting. I know Warsh has finally been tabbed, but let's talk about it. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so on the Clarity Act, the Senate Banking Committee officially advanced the Clarity Act after quite a lengthy markup session, focused on digital asset market structure, stablecoin regulation, and how crypto businesses would be regulated in the United States. While the hearing covered the broader digital asset industry, several Bitcoin-related moments quickly spread across social media. Senator Cynthia Lummis defended Bitcoin as a tool for financial freedom and open access, arguing the technology gives individuals more control over their money, regardless of where they live or what government they live under.
It provides a level playing field regardless of whether you live in Rwanda or Queens, New York, about transmitting money faster and cheaper. It provides a woman who's trying to get out of a battered, miserable marriage the opportunity to walk away with her money in her head. It provides people who are being tortured in foreign countries the opportunity to walk away from that country with their money in their head because Bitcoin can be memorized. This is an innovation that provides individual freedom, individual savings. It is faster, cheaper, it is secure, and we're inviting that consumer environment into our country.
Lummis also argued the U.S. financial system is inevitably moving toward digital assets, saying the dollar itself will eventually become digitized, and defending language in the bill that clarifies banks can use digital assets for activities they already are legally permitted to perform.
There are 3 states that already allow banks to do this. One is Virginia, Wyoming, Louisiana. And after this bill passes, other states will allow it to do it. The bank permissibility language in our legislation does one thing. It simply confirms that banks can use digital assets to conduct activities that they already allow to perform by law. The US dollar is going to be digitized. It is going to be a digital asset.
All right, let's go ahead and bring back Hank, and also bring in Fernando, the Bitcoin Libertarian. Fernando, how you doing, man? Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you, to all the Roxom people and all the Roxom audience as well as every Friday.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Fernando, would like to get your take on this. Also kind of from the outside looking in a little bit. When you see this sort of, it's pretty amazing in my mind to see. I was getting chills at that first Senator Cynthia Lummis speech. I mean, talking about Bitcoin in those ways, to see sort of how far we've come, where you have a sitting U.S., United States of American senator who's up there talking about how you can take Bitcoin anywhere in your head, no matter where you are in the world. I mean, what does that make? What does that say to you? What does it make you feel?
Oh, it feels wonderful because even though I'm a Bitcoin maximalist and we all grew up the maximalists with fuck the state, fuck the banks, but in the meantime, we grew up and we discovered that we need also the banks and the governments to make Bitcoin win. And listening to a senator, a US senator, talking like this about Bitcoin, it makes me super happy. And even though I think that we are still super early, we are in the right way. I see that Bitcoin is winning. And as my perspective, every time I say that if Bitcoin wins, humanity is going to go for like 10, 20,000 years of prosperity. If Bitcoin loses, we are going to be extinct in 100, 150 years. Watching a senator of the United States doing that, talking like this about Bitcoin, it is amazing. It's super happy, make me super happy.
Yeah, and Hank, I'd love to get your perspective on it too. I mean, you and I were giving live commentary on this yesterday. But I mean, pretty remarkable to see, and I think we're all gonna miss Senator Lummis a lot because she is retiring, unfortunately. But more power to her. Is retiring after her term finishes. But what was your read on this? I mean, does it move the needle for the other, let's say, for the Democrats in the room who maybe thought they were against this whole thing? But then, I mean, it's hard to hear something like that and not think, wow, well, this actually sounds perfectly aligned with American values, the American ideal. How do you come out against something like that?
I don't think you do. I mean, I think we're seeing right now Bitcoin's place within the financial system is very much here to stay. I mean, as kind of Fernando mentioned, it's crazy. Like just 5 years ago, the very idea of a sitting U.S. senator defending Bitcoin on the Senate Banking Committee would have been the news here. But this is just, now we're seeing this is actually the legislation being put in place. And the framing flip, I think, is kind of the biggest story that we saw here, because it used to be prove that, crypto isn't a scam. Now the posture is prove the regulation isn't going to kill it. And Lummis isn't having to plead about Bitcoin in its place anymore. She's actually legislating it. So we're seeing like a completely different power dynamic than we'd seen in years past. We saw Warsh, who's seemingly a pro-Bitcoin Fed chair, get confirmed earlier this week. As far as the Democrats, is this something they can't, afford to ignore anymore? So, while we were kind of wondering what Bitcoin's place in the financial ecosystem would be had maybe Trump not won, and the Democrats had won, it's exciting. We're in an interesting time, and I don't think Bitcoin can be ignored by either side of the aisle. Otherwise, they might be in a lot of trouble. So this has been an exciting week for us here. The price hasn't quite reflected it, but the underlying fundamentals and what we're seeing being built is very exciting.
Yeah.
And can I add something? Because one of the things that Senator Lummis said is that Bitcoin gives you freedom for people under dictatorships to walk away with all your money. And this is something that's why I discovered Bitcoin. In 2011 in Argentina, we had a very huge capital control to send money abroad, or to receive money from abroad. And Bitcoin was the way for me and for many people who work for companies or doing business abroad to receive our money and to be able to work in Argentina. So listening to a senator of the United States saying that it reflects the real ethos of Bitcoin, the freedom, the sovereignty, your freedom of using your property rights is such amazing, because that's the way I discovered Bitcoin back in the days.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that a little bit, Fernando, because I think that perspective is extremely valuable. And in the United States right now, especially, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the reality, right? That most people in the U.S., in let's say, so-called Western world, look at Bitcoin as just a great store of value. I mean, an incredible store of value, right? And nothing wrong with that. Like saving in Bitcoin is using Bitcoin. But by the same token, no pun intended, throughout much of the global south, the rest of the world, Bitcoin is not just a store of value. It is actually, in many cases, the only way you can move money. It's literally the only way you can move money permissionlessly and be able to engage in commerce, be able to actually work. So, I mean, do you think that there's a sort of a different mindset about what Bitcoin is and how powerful it is when you sort of come from outside the US versus some of these senators, let's say even on the Democratic side, that are not very, they look at Bitcoin as this almost evil thing, many of them, Elizabeth Warren being one of them. What would you say to them about just kind of your experience and what Bitcoin means for somebody who didn't grow up in the United States with the US dollar, with the privilege, the financial privilege of, living in one of the strongest banking systems with the world's reserve currency?
Well, for us, for people in the third world, it makes us, again, fight against the poor banking system, the restrictions that the government puts you. Even though now I think that the fastest way for Bitcoin to win is as a store of value. You can see all the development in Latin America. Now, Latin America is more with stable coins for transferring money. I talk a lot with Hank about the stable coins used in Latin America. But today, I was recording a podcast for my channel in Spanish. I was talking about how people in Africa uses Bitcoin. And for example, for us in Latin America, probably using Bitcoin is a good way to store value, a good way to save money for our retirement, a good way to transfer money borderless and fight inflation. But in Africa, the circular economies of Africa, they cannot even work if they don't have Bitcoin. The whole commerce in Africa, in many communities, is made with Bitcoin. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell their products, to receive tourists, to move money from one region to another, not from one country to another, or one province to another. So that is the magic of Bitcoin. And I think that Senator Lummis understands extremely, and especially for United States, that you value a lot the freedom in the United States, that is the country of freedom. Having a senator talking Bitcoin about that, I think that Bitcoin is in the DNA of American Constitution. So America needs to be I think that the engine of the Bitcoin revolution. Is doing with the companies with the treasury companies. But from the government side, needs to be the engine, because usually America is the engine of the West world, or the free world. So, and it's very nice to hear a person understanding Bitcoin in that way as Senator Lummis.
I say amen to that, and I hope that Senator Warren, as a frequent listener and viewer of Roxom TV, will take heed to those words, because I think that perspective is so important. And it's so valuable, and it's very easy to forget. Sometimes you need somebody from outside America to remind you what America is all about. So, Fernando, I thank you for that. And I have no notes on those words. Well said. I know we've got to get you out of here a little bit early. So I just want to give you a chance. If Senator Warren is watching this and she wants to get in touch with you afterwards to be able to learn more about what the American dream really means, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
Oh, they can go to our Twitter account, the Bitcoin _, THE Bitcoin _. Our YouTube in Spanish is Libertarian BTC ESP. And now I'm going back to record podcast in English. So Libertarian BTC is our YouTube channel in English. So that's the way where everyone can find us.
Love it. Well, Fernando, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you for those words. Again, I hope that Senator Elizabeth Warren, as she is watching this, does take heed of that and maybe perhaps changes her opinion even just a little bit. So, Fernando, thank you so much for your time.
Or probably, if she watches me, she can send me some advice where to invest in stocks, because I think she has very good information which stocks to invest. So it's gonna be funny.
Absolutely. I'd like her to be my advisor on that too. She could be my quant. Clearly, she's pretty good at it. On that salary, manages to be a decamillionaire. So good for her. But that's the American dream, right? Become a politician and suckle off the teat of the taxpayer until you're a multimillionaire. But I digress. Fernando, thank you so much for joining us. As always, great to chat with you, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys on next Friday. Happy Friday and happy weekend to all the people in Roxom and all the audience, of course.
Thanks, Fernando.
Thanks, Fernando.
And we're going to keep...
All right, Walker,
oh, yeah,
I want to talk with you a little bit more about this. Can we chat a little more about this story? I have a question for you about
Absolutely.
it. Okay, so I want to ask you about part of the discussion yesterday. We saw it from Senator Chris Van Hollen, and we saw it from your girlfriend, Senator Elizabeth Warren. They were talking about an amendment that would potentially ban the president and members of Congress and other senior executive branch officials from owning, promoting, or affiliating with digital asset businesses. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we've seen Trump coin, we've seen Melania coin, we've seen a lot of different coins. We've talked about yesterday, we had a fun conversation with G-Money about those being good or bad for kind of the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole. What are your thoughts on that type of amendment to something like this? Do you think that would be a good thing, a bad thing? We don't do it for stocks, so should we do it for crypto? I mean, they're similar but different. What did you make of that? Do you think that would be an important amendment to include to the Clarity Bill?
I think a lot of this is Elizabeth Warren trying to do some grandstanding and get her sound bites in. In terms of whether or not you should be banned from that, I need to look. I'm not do not have the specific text of that amendment memorized, so I would need to consult it. But I think from kind of a first principles level, you should have equal treat. If you're going to regulate these things, regulate them in a way that is comparable to how we already regulate stocks, right? With appropriate disclosures and all these things. Now, not that stops any of the insider trading. That's the other thing. It's like we all already know that all this insider trading is going on. And what I find interesting is when people pretend like somehow these issues of fraud or insider trading or all these self-dealing are all just this thing that is unique to the digital asset sphere. Like certainly there is a lot of that there. It's like when people pretend money laundering only became possible once Bitcoin existed. It's like before that we didn't have any money laundering. Now we have money laundering. Thanks a lot, Bitcoin. But by the same token, I mean, you know how I feel about President Trump and the First Lady launching shitcoins. I think that was a very bad thing. Because
I think most of us feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's except G-Money. But hey, more power to him. I enjoyed that conversation very much. Respect his opinion on that. Okay, I think that you could probably put some pretty common sense rules in place. But by the same token, it's like some of this stuff should work itself out because you realize, wow, like if you get scammed by one of your senators, right, because they launched a shitcoin, like, boy, you're probably not going to vote for them. Like, you're going to get yourself out of office pretty quickly with that kind of dealing. I generally think that the rules should be applied evenly across these different asset classes. And the rules don't even seem to do anything in the first place. Like, if we didn't have any instances of insider trading and self-dealing and all these things already, I would say, okay, yeah, maybe we need some. But we have the rules in the books. They don't care. Nothing changes. All of these things already exist. So, like, are we going to fix Washington's corruption with another amendment? Nope. Yeah. Like that's not going to happen. So I think that's why I think a lot of this is just very performative, right? It's basically the Democrats also trying to get different little hooks in that they can potentially use to try and prosecute Trump after he leaves office again. But let's see. I do want to hear, I think, from a few of the other. We've got some great clips. As far as some of the other senators and what their perspectives were on this. So let's keep on rolling so we can give you guys a few more of those highlights, because Committee Chairman Senator Tim Scott framed the Clarity Act as an opportunity-focused bill designed to expand access, encourage innovation, and support everyday Americans rather than protecting legacy financial interests.
This legislation does not take sides between traditional finance and new technology, or Republicans and Democrats. It takes the side of everyday Americans. It brings digital assets out of the shadows and into a system that is safer, fairer, and more transparent. This is what good governance looks like. Today, we take a step forward together to protect investors, grow our economy, and keep America leading the world.
Scott also argued digital assets could help lower costs and open financial opportunities for people who have traditionally been underserved by the banking system.
As a kid who grew up in poverty, the thing that attracts me to this issue the most is democratization, an opportunity to lower prices, create access points that today does not exist. This ought not be about Republicans and Democrats. It ought not be about who's on which side of the aisle or whether you agree with what we've done. This should be about the American people and nothing else. I want single mothers like the one that raised me to have more opportunities, more access at a lower price. And so we will disagree on this today. But I hope that what we end up with is a legislative product that is good now and gets another bite at the apple as it heads to the floor.
One of the lighter moments came when Senator Bernie Moreno joked about using Bitcoin to pay taxes years ago before the asset's massive price appreciation.
In 2016, I became the first person in the United States of America to pay my taxes with Bitcoin to show the capabilities of the technology. Had I met the senator from Rhode Island, I would not have done that, as I paid $3,000 in taxes with 2 Bitcoin. So I would absolutely be in a better spot had I not done that. So we should have met each other back then.
I do want to make a note that the $3,000 that you used for the Bitcoin would today be worth how much?
Too soon.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that point was clear.
Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren warned the legislation could, quote, blow up the economy, continuing her criticism of the crypto industry and drawing immediate backlash online from Bitcoin and crypto supporters.
The bill is set to unleash unregulated crypto upon our economy. It would also increase leverage across a range of different asset classes and regulatory regimes. I appreciate that Amendment 115 takes some steps toward protecting consumers from the havoc of this new regime, but it is not enough. The amendment further seems to remove SIPC protections from accounts with crypto, which highlights one of the real paradoxes in this bill. It pushes more of the market into crypto and removes protections for investors and removes recourse for victims. That is the wrong direction to go in.
All right.
When this blows up at the economy, I hope everybody remembers
Mr. Chairman.
Many of Warren's proposed amendments were rapidly voted down during the markup process, highlighting how much momentum the legislation currently has inside the committee, despite opposition from some lawmakers. The Clarity Act now moves further into the Senate process, where lawmakers are expected to continue negotiating over stablecoin rules, SEC and CFTC jurisdiction, and broader digital asset oversight. For markets, the bigger signal is that Congress is now actively debating how Bitcoin and digital assets will integrate into the U.S. financial system. Hank, I want to go ahead and bring you back on in here. I mean, boy, it was fascinating watching these exchanges, right? And, Elizabeth Warren, thank goodness she warned us, this could blow up the economy. And, you've been warned, says Karen Pocahontas. But again, the whole irony to me is you don't need Bitcoin and, quote, crypto to blow up the economy.
No, we're doing that just fine
plenty well.
it.
I don't know if anybody just remembers, a little thing called, the Great Financial Crisis. Have we all forgotten that? Is our memory that short? Because Bitcoin didn't even exist yet, and actually was created much in response to that. So it's all rather humorous to me, some of these points she brings up. But I'd love your perspective.
I'm just surprised by somebody who has such vitriol towards if you do the research, I just don't get how she can have this point of view. To the point, it was funny when she was talking, I don't know if you saw in that clip, right before she went into her last little thing, Tim Scott just went, okay. He was freaking done with her talking. And she was like, I just want to warn all of you. I'm like, listen, tell me you don't know what you're talking about without telling me you don't know what you're talking about. Elizabeth Warren is just really misguided on this particular issue amongst some others for sure as well. So I don't make much of it. Of course, there's going to be a boo bird in the crowd. But she's also made $12 million, as we kind of mentioned, on a $173,000 salary. So my thinking, maybe she bought some Bitcoin on the sneak. Those are some pretty good returns. I think she might be playing us all for a fool while she's secretly stacking. I mean, I don't know. But Warren, I take it with a grain of salt. I know you love her, right?
Oh, I love her. I mean, she is just such a classic example of she's a true politician. And I don't mean that as a compliment. She's ineffective. She's fundamentally anti-freedom. like to have been crusading against Bitcoin for so very long now. And, her whole, her anti-crypto army and all of this. I mean, I think the fundamental thing is here is that if you are vehemently against Bitcoin, you must be vehemently against freedom, individual rights, property rights, any semblance of self-sovereignty, any semblance of free association and free trade and free commerce between individuals. And this is insane to me, because as somebody who purports to be on the side of the little guy, right? She's always fighting for the little guy, fighting for the consumer. Well, if you were truly doing that, you would be the biggest Bitcoin proponent in the world. But you're not. Yeah. You're adamantly against Bitcoin. She has been for years, whether it be for because of the whatever, name the FUD. You could, do one of those, spinner wheels.
Because of FTX.
Yeah, because it's because of the fraud. It's because of the money laundering. It's because of the environment. It doesn't matter. Like, name a piece of Bitcoin FUD. Elizabeth Warren has thrown it out there. And the other thing too is that, okay, let's play devil's advocate here. On the one hand, many of her criticisms of the quote crypto space are valid. And I wish that there was because we know that she doesn't write her tweets or read anything that is actually said out there. Like, that's all her staffers. I wish if anybody knows an Elizabeth Warren staffer somehow, I wish that you guys could get across to the senator that, look, you and Bitcoiners agree on a lot of the stuff with regard to the scams in the crypto space. You won't find any disagreement from Bitcoiners there. Maybe on how they should be dealt with or not dealt with, right? Like, if she obviously would like a heavier hand, and most Bitcoiners would say, like, let the market sort it out. But that she doesn't actually understand Bitcoin because she constantly conflates Bitcoin and crypto. The conflation of Bitcoin and crypto always is a signal that whoever is doing the conflating has a fundamental lack of understanding about what Bitcoin truly means. Because if you understood what Bitcoin truly means, what it truly means for the individual, right? For the family, for the corporation, for the nation state, for everyone, because Bitcoin doesn't care who you are, then you would be pro-Bitcoin. Like, to be anti-Bitcoin is either to be anti-freedom or to not understand what Bitcoin means. Like, it's one of the two. Maybe it's both for her. I can't say.
My problem with Elizabeth Warren is anytime she stops talking, I initially feel compelled to be like, but I thought this was America. I thought this was America. Every damn time she says something, that's what the
last
retort
time I checked.
Instantly go to. Yeah, this was still America. God. Well, she gave us her warning, so we'll see how that one goes. It wasn't very effective yesterday. I think every single one of her things didn't pass. So womp womp. All right, let's move on to our next story here, Walker, because President Donald Trump's latest federal ethics filing dropped a small but interesting detail. His family trust purchased shares of Strategy in transactions valued between $50,000 and $100,000. The filing lists multiple Strategy transactions tied to Trump's trust structure, both purchases and sales of MSTR shares. Now, as an important caveat, the filing does not necessarily mean Trump personally pulled the trigger on these trades. Reuters noted the assets sit inside a trust managed by his children, and the filing itself doesn't specify who's actually making the investment calls. But the signal here is pretty hard to ignore. Strategy has effectively become Wall Street's biggest Bitcoin accumulation monster. The company currently holds more than 818,000 Bitcoin on its balance sheet, making it the largest corporate BTC treasury in the world. For Bitcoin markets, this is one more sign the asset is moving deeper into the political, regulatory, and institutional mainstream. And the people writing the rules increasingly have skin in the game. Walker, what do you make of this one? I mean, if there was ever a sign of where things are going, I think it's Trump buying Strategy, getting those dividends. What did you make of that? I mean, Michael Saylor's got to be pleased.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Did they clarify whether they took a position in MSTR or was it in one of the preferred? Was it in STRC?
That's a great question. I think it might have just been
MSTR.
In, let's see, both purchases and sales of MSTR shares.
Okay. I mean, I would say that, like, as whoever is operating the Trump family trust, that's a prudent financial decision. The only thing that's not prudent about it is probably the size of the exposure, which appears pretty small. Guessing the size of that trust is quite substantial. But I think that this is just one of those things where I hear this kind of news and I think, well, yeah, duh. I can't believe that they weren't doing this sooner, right?
Yeah.
It's almost been like this weird little secret in this niche community for a while, that both with regard to Bitcoin, but also with regard to what Saylor has been doing, right? Even though Saylor has been, not trying to hide it. He's been the most public person ever. He has been going, the man has done more podcasts probably than, than most humans will ever even listen to in their entire life. It's incredible the stamina this guy has. But he's been going out there and talking about this very publicly for years now. And, when we're in the Bitcoin echo chamber sometimes, we tend to forget that not everybody just looks at that and says, oh yeah, duh, what Saylor's doing with strategy is brilliant, right? Most people just have no idea. I still haven't even heard of that. Like, most people don't understand Bitcoin. The percentage of people that also, know what Bitcoin is, like the percentage of them that maybe even have heard of strategy, MSTR or STRC, is vanishingly small compared to that. That said, strategy has a ton of shareholders all over the world. Like, Michael Saylor's been doing this in public. There's a growing acknowledgement that what he is doing is quite brilliant. And he was the first to do it, right? He's the first to have this strategy, and named that company. The rebrand was spot on there. But I think that this is one of those things, Hank, that in retrospect, much like Bitcoin, it will be so obvious. It will be so painfully obvious. But most people, it's non-obvious right now to most people, which, therein lies your alpha. Therein lies your edge, right? You know something, you have information that other people do not. That is an edge. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to talk about, I don't remember if we had the chance to chat about this last week, but obviously there was that big news about Saylor coming out, and he went from never sell your Bitcoin to essentially sell it if it allows you to buy more Bitcoin. We're like a week and change removed from that announcement. We know that was a big shift for a lot of people because Michael Saylor is kind of the high priest of BTC right now. What are your thoughts now that we're kind of a week removed from that? I feel like it hasn't been that big of a story. I mean, I guess it makes a lot of sense if you need to sell it to acquire more. Sometimes that probably should be the play. But do you feel like that kind of shook the foundation of the Bitcoin ecosystem at all? Because, I mean, Saylor just coming out, when you read the words and say, we might sell our Bitcoin sometimes, definitely seemed like a shift from what we had heard pretty much, all the other times we had spoken to him. So what did you make of that shift? Was that really a big deal, or is we're not even talking about that anymore?
To me, I thought it, again, was one of those things that just made a lot of sense. Saylor is speaking as the chairman of a publicly traded company. A huge criticism of MSTR and even, STRC, of the whole strategy ecosystem from detractors has been that it's this Ponzi scheme, right? Like, well, how can you say that this is what's backing, that you have this treasury, but you're never going to sell this treasury? Well, then it's, it's basically worth nothing, right? He's just basically trying to take the kneecaps out of anybody who would continue to bring up that sort of idiotic idea, right?
Yeah.
He has a fiduciary duty not to Bitcoin, but to shareholders of his company. That is who he is responsible to. That is who he reports to, right? That is his job, is to increase shareholder value. And if he, to me, it's like, okay, first of all, I don't think has or would or will sell any of his personal Bitcoin, right? He has a lot of Bitcoin.
Personally.
He has no need to. So I think that never sell your Bitcoin still rings very true for him at a personal level. But him as the chairman of a growing and massive publicly traded company, he's going to have to do certain things. But I think more so than actually signaling that this was something that he was going to do anytime soon, he was signaling that, look, hey, you say we're never going to, you're saying that this is a problem that we won't ever sell. Okay, if we need to, we'll sell. And we'll do it in a way that's accretive to our Bitcoin per share. That puts to bed a lot of the criticisms, I think. And he's also obviously angling for both S&P 500 inclusion, a nice bond rating on STRC. These are things that he's doing. He's a master of PR. He's a master of communication. And in my mind, this was something where I know a lot of people got up in arms about this, but it's like, guys, his job is to increase shareholder value. That's his job. People don't buy MSTR or STRC because they think that they own Bitcoin because of it. They buy it because it's a stock, and they think the stock price is going to go up for a sense with regard to MSTR, not STRC, but they think the stock price is going to go up faster than Bitcoin goes up. That's why people buy it. It's not because anyone thinks they own Bitcoin. It's not because you have any say over what they do with their Bitcoin. You buy it because you are buying a security. You are buying you believe in what Michael Saylor is doing, and you believe he is going to make you money. You believe he's going to make you wealthy. That's why people do it. So for people saying well, he said you should never sell your Bitcoin, but now he says he might sell, that his company might sell Bitcoin. It's like, okay, has he sold any personally? Is his advice in any way invalid? Has he been a net positive or a net negative to Bitcoin? I think all of those questions are pretty easily answered. Like those are rhetorical questions, right? And so to me, yeah, I wasn't particularly shocked about this. I was honestly surprised he hadn't said this sooner to kind of clip the wings off of the detractors. But I think it was a prudent thing to do from the perspective of a publicly traded company's chairman. Like, yeah, guys, you have to remember he is operating on a different level. He needs to communicate in a different way to achieve different ends. His end, his ends are not your ends. He's looking at things differently. And we all know he thinks very, very far into the future. Like if you think he just somehow is like lost faith in Bitcoin, we know that's not it. We know that's not it because, you know, he puts his money where his mouth is quite literally every single week. So I'm honestly like almost looking forward to the first time that they sell Bitcoin, because I think you may see, you know, there may be traders who try to, you know, make a buck on either side of that trade, because maybe it'll show, you know, people will be showing some panic. Oh my God, MSTR, they're selling their Bitcoin now. And I can't wait till he does that. We get over that little hump. He shows the look, that was accretive to Bitcoin. And then he comes back the next week and buys even more than they sold, because that's going to shut a hell of a lot of people up.
Yeah. I'm like you. I'm surprised he didn't actually come out with this earlier, because I feel like really the only people that would have at least an initial kind of gut check problem with this would be Bitcoiners. But I think about all the people that aren't in this space currently, right? And I'm like, to me, that kind of adds credibility to him in a lot of ways, because it's not just buy Bitcoin, make money. Like that just seems that's this like overly maximalist point of view that I can't get behind in any realm, let alone Bitcoin. But if you're saying, hey, we're going to take a pragmatic approach to acquiring more, which sometimes means we might have to sell some, I can get behind that. And I feel like bigger institutions will hear that and be like, oh, this guy just isn't all in on Bitcoin. He actually has more of a plan here than maybe we initially thought. So I like it. I'll see how it plays out. We haven't really heard much of it since the announcement came out. So like you said, I think it was something we were all just kind of waiting for, at least in the community. And hopefully the ramifications of that in terms of institutions that aren't in the space maybe are turning more of an eye and are a little more crypto curious or Bitcoin curious than they were the days before, but we'll see. All right, let's move on to our next story here, Walker, because today is a special day. It's the day that Jerome Powell officially hands over the keys to the most powerful financial institution on the planet. We're going to miss him. Now, his term as the federal chair reserve does end, and Kevin Warsh was confirmed by the Senate earlier this week, and he will be the one taking the gavel going forward. Now, before we look forward, Federal Reserve reporter Howard Schneider takes us back through what was, by any measure, one of the strangest chairmanships in Fed history under the leadership of Jerome Powell. Take a look.
Jerome Powell's tenure as Fed chair comes to a close Friday, and what's distinguished him perhaps most of all from his predecessors is just how public-facing he's had to be throughout it. There was COVID-19. This forced the Fed into a dramatic expansion of its presence in the economy, had Powell going on 60 Minutes to explain, we will be there, we will do what's necessary to keep this economy afloat throughout this. And then there was the inflation that followed it, and this forced him into another mold, that of saying, listen, we will fix this, and in a sense take the heat for letting inflation get out of control in the first place. He was appointed to the role by President Trump, pretty quickly ran into conflict with the president.
He's terrible.
It started with words. Trump has been berating him, calling for rate cuts, calling him an enemy of the people.
3.1 billion. It went up a little bit or a lot.
It eventually morphed into a legal assault as well. Trump tried to fire one of Powell's colleagues. And then there was a criminal investigation of Powell himself.
This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure.
That's one aspect of his chairmanship that really kept him in the public eye. Powell has met more lawmakers and more often with members of the Senate than any of his predecessors. And that has probably stood him in good stead when it came to sort of resisting some of these efforts by Trump to erode the Fed's independence and really try to fire him from the board. Trump's appointee to succeed Powell, Kevin Warsh, was held up in the Senate until that investigation got dropped.
Let's get Warsh in there and do that by eliminating a bogus investigation that started this whole drama.
Kevin Warsh has had his nomination approved by the Senate. He's got an immediate problem with inflation. Numbers that have been coming out over the last few months really have not supported the narrative that inflation would peak because of tariffs and oil prices. So far from being able to cut rates, as President Trump still says he expects, and he may face some growing sentiment among his colleagues to begin indicating that they may actually have to raise interest rates.
And unlike Powell, Warsh has been openly arguing for years that the Fed lost its credibility after a long run of aggressive balance sheet expansion and one market intervention after another. During his confirmation process, he repeatedly called for regime change at the Fed, signaling a shift toward a framework more focused on interest rates and less dependent on the kind of large-scale asset purchases that defined the last 2 decades. And here's where it gets interesting for our audience. Warsh has taken a notably different stance on Bitcoin and digital assets than just about any other modern central banker. He had previously called Bitcoin an important asset and a very good policeman for policy, arguing that the price of Bitcoin actually reflects market confidence in how the Fed is managing the dollar. And in another clip now circulating online, Warsh said, "If you're under 40, Bitcoin is your new gold." That is the sentence that has Bitcoiners paying close attention today, because the man saying it is no longer a commentator on the sidelines. He is now the most powerful central banker in the world. Walker, we're bringing you back here. We just watched the most powerful central banker on the planet hand off the gavel to a guy who has openly said, if you're under 40, Bitcoin is your new gold. What did you make of that? Are you excited for Warsh taking the seat as the Fed chair here, or what did you make of what we saw from him this week?
Well, you know, I'll be more excited when the Federal Reserve is abolished. But until then, I do think
such
that
a wet blanket.
You know, okay, that abolition of the Federal Reserve aside, I do think that it is a very interesting moment. I mean, we're like, this is again, we've been covering this extensively, Hank, you and I, and across the Roxom shows. This is a big shift in the Overton window, right? When you have an incoming Fed chair who not only speaks about Bitcoin, because Jerome Powell has done that. Jerome Powell actually has made some comments. Jerome Powell called Bitcoin digital gold at one point, maybe a year or so ago. He said some other things about it too. But now you've got an incoming guy who is coming in and is very clearly not just ambivalent towards Bitcoin, not negative towards Bitcoin. He is positive about Bitcoin and speaking about it in ways that I think are really interesting. One of the clips we played here on Roxom quite a lot is that interview with him where he talks about Bitcoin being basically an indicator of sort of market mismanagement by the Fed, right? A canary in the coal mine, if you will. And so I think him talking about it in that way, talking about how Bitcoin is the gold, new gold for people under 40, that's really powerful. And it's going to be very interesting to see how much this, Bitcoin continues to be part of his repertoire of things that he talks about. I'm just imagining press conferences with him, which are widely viewed. The Fed press conferences. Does he start to slip Bitcoin in there? It's a pretty interesting moment. Regardless, I think we all know what my position on the Fed is. More broadly, they're a cabal of
burn it to the ground.
They're a cabal, metaphorically, of course. They're a cabal of unelected banker bureaucrats who set the price for money, and therefore we don't actually live in a free market because we don't have a free market for money. But setting all that aside, this is a really interesting and fascinating moment. And just again, boy, that Overton window just keeps getting blown out wider and wider when it comes to Bitcoin. And I think that is something to pay attention to.
It is. And, one thing I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around right now, Walker, and maybe you can help me understand this a little better. We heard Warsh come out and say that Bitcoin is a policeman for policy line during his confirmation hearing. And it's interesting because he's kind of said that how Bitcoin's price is kind of indicative of how the Fed is doing their job, right? So for my question is, we see Warsh come in here. He seemingly is pro-Bitcoin. He sees the importance of digital assets. But if Bitcoin's price if it's higher, is reflective that the Fed is actually doing a worse job, then wouldn't that necessarily mean he would then in a certain way be trying to keep the Bitcoin price lower, because then that would indicate that he's doing a better job at the Fed? Does that make sense what I'm saying here? You get what I mean?
I think I understand what you're saying. Like if Bitcoin is a barometer for how well the Fed is
then you
managing
wouldn't want it
things.
higher.
Right. But that being said, it's there's just really nothing he can do, right? Bitcoin is also, while a lot of Bitcoin ownership and usage from a store value perspective, at least, is concentrated in the United States of America, Bitcoin is global. And it is ultimately, it's not just an indicator of how the U.S. central bank is doing. It's an indicator of how well every central bank is doing. It's an indicator of how much faith people have in the traditional fiat system, the legacy fiat system, let's say. And I think more and more the fact that Bitcoin has gone from being worth nothing to being worth over $100,000, now we're back to a measly, 80,000 or whatever it is today, in the space of 17 years, that tells you exactly how much faith or lack thereof people have in the fiat bankers' ability to actually make things work. Because I think right now there's a growing realization, because people see it at the gas pump, they see it in their bank account, they see it all over the place, that whatever is being done, it's not really working for the majority of people. And this is the problem we have. We see, you know, people complaining about inequality, and we just got to tax the rich. There shouldn't be billionaires, all these things. But all these things that people complain about, they're ultimately symptoms. They're symptoms of a greater disease. They're not the disease itself. The disease isn't billionaires. The disease isn't inequality. Those are symptoms, right? They're symptoms of the fact that our money is fundamentally broken, that the interest rate and the creation of new money is decided by people that nobody voted for, right? I'm not saying that voting for them would make things any better, because everybody's just going to vote for who's going to give them more money, which is exactly what democracy is these days anyway. So that's not going to fix the problem. The problem is that it exists in the first place, that it can be manipulated, the interest rate can be manipulated, that the printing of money can be done at a whim, out of thin air, with absolutely nothing backing it whatsoever. Bitcoin is the money. It needs no backing. It is the money itself. And so I think that what I like about Kevin Warsh is that he is talking about Bitcoin. And the more that somebody like him talks about Bitcoin and talks about it favorably, the more people might check their priors and say, you know what, we got the Federal Reserve Chair speaking kind of positively about this Bitcoin thing. I thought that was a scam. Maybe it's worth a second look. It's the same when Larry Fink of BlackRock starts talking positively about Bitcoin, issuing Bitcoin ETFs. People check their priors a little bit and they think, maybe I don't have all the information. All of these very, you know, big figures, whether it be in banking, politics, or finance, when they talk about Bitcoin in positive ways, people listen. And they listen the same way that when, you know, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, rest in peace, would say incredibly negative things about Bitcoin, people listen to that too. They look for people that they trust because they don't want to do all the research themselves. They want to have someone that they can go to that will filter that for them and give them basically what to think, right? Or at least how to direct their thinking. Anytime this Overton window gets blown more open, I think that's a positive thing when Bitcoin is being spoken about positively.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm a big any publicity is good publicity kind of guy in general, but I just don't see how it works if Bitcoin is an indicator of how the Fed is doing their job, and like Bitcoin gets really high, then that would seemingly mean like, oh, maybe we need to increase rates, right? Because then that would be the opposite thing that's necessarily good for Bitcoin. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how Warsh is going to run the Fed chair when he's actually up in there and has things going, but I don't know. Like, obviously, I'm very bullish, but yeah, those things don't seem to work in tandem with me. Bitcoin's price getting higher, if that's also an indicator that the Fed is doing their job properly or not. Like, that seems like those are two opposite ends here. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think we got one more interesting story here on the AI realm in Bitcoin. I think you were going to read for us, right? I'm interested in hearing this one.
Yeah, this one is fascinating. So a Bitcoin holder just recovered access to a wallet locked for more than a decade. And the story is going viral across X because it shows how AI could become a powerful tool for Bitcoin self-custody recovery. The user, known as CPRKN on X, claimed he regained access to Bitcoin he'd been locked out of for 11 years using Anthropic's Claude AI model to analyze files from an old college computer. Holy fucking shit. Oh my God, Claude just cracked this shit, he posted. Tried like 7 passwords. According to the thread, Claude did not crack Bitcoin, obviously, or break the seed phrase, also obviously. Instead, it helped identify an old wallet file that matched a forgotten mnemonic phrase the user had discovered weeks earlier in a notebook. Last-ditch effort dumped my whole college computer into Claude, he wrote. It found an old wallet file and the mnemonic successfully decrypted. The password reportedly turned out to be LOL 420 fuck the police! ! What a great password. The story quickly spread because it highlights something about Bitcoin, something very important. The network itself was obviously never compromised. Claude didn't crack a seed phrase. It decrypted a local file stored in a device that already contained the correct recovery information. That means there are still zero security concerns for Bitcoin holders using proper self-custody practices. And after finally recovering the funds, the newly re-wealthy Bitcoiner tagged electronic music artist deadmau5 on X with one final message. Please play at my wedding next year. I can afford you now, but hook it up a little maybe. I'm just a guy. Love that. Hank, You got to love a guy shooting his shot with dead mouse at the end. But I mean, that's got to. I mean, what a payday after that long. And you hear these stories. There's been tons of these stories, right? There's the guy who's been like excavating a landfill for over a decade.
Yeah, I think he finally gave up on that one.
Did he get? He might have too. But you hear these stories, and this is one of the things that I think actually scares a lot of people off from Bitcoin. This radical idea that there's no customer service agent to call. There's no, there's no, oops, we'll just reset that password for you. There's none of that. You have private property that you yourself control, and nobody can take it away from you. That also means nobody can help you get it back if you screw something up. So I wonder if this story, I wonder if we start to see a wave of these from old Bitcoin OGs who thought they had some lost coins, and it turns out, hey, I've still got the old computer. Maybe I can use AI to help me crack it. I don't know. I loved reading this story. I've been loving following this. The guy was just so stoked. He loved to see it. I mean, heck of a payday. But what did you think as you were hearing this?
I'm just glad to hear an AI story where they're not taking our jobs and we're actually using it for something good, like recovering an old password. I mean, I think you're right. This is something we're going to be seeing more often. I actually had a buddy a couple years ago who had a similar problem with an old Trezor wallet, and he had over like $3 million in there. And he went to like all lengths of the planet, like trying to figure out how to do it. And they finally found some guy who was able to crack it. But yeah, part of what worries me about this story a little bit is that we're going to see the uneducated conflate this story and being like, AI cracked Bitcoin, right? That's what we're going to hear. And we're going to hear this whole mountain of FUD that is completely untrue, as you and I both know. So like, I think this is great. There are, I'm sure, many other people that are in similar situations. I'm kind of disappointed because maybe like 1 million of those Bitcoin we thought were lost will come back in the system. I don't know. But AI is good for some stuff too. And hey, I'm curious to how this works though. He just like somehow dumped everything from his old laptop into Claude, and it was able to make sense of all the chicken scratch. Like it's an interesting story. I'm here for it, but I'm sure we'll be seeing more of them.
Yeah. So depending on kind of when this happened, when he first kind of lost access to it, I think would tell us a lot more. And I don't know the intimate details of that. But he was, from what I know, he was able to, pump it in there. Claude found this old wallet file and then was able to decrypt that file. Again, it didn't crack the seed phrase, like, because obviously that takes, that's a
quantum computer that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And even the quantum computer is not cracking a seed phrase. It's just not happening. It's like, I forget what the analogy is, but it's like, it's so many, like, the numbers are so big in terms of how many years it would take. Even if all the computing power on the planet were directed towards trying to crack one, seed phrase, that like we would create like a black hole basically of like, hey, there's all this crazy stuff to it. Like, it's just not happening. But what it is useful for is being able to go in there, make sense of a bunch of, disparate data, look for something specific. And I think that's a really powerful tool. But you are right that for sure somebody's boomer uncle is reading this, reads about this story and says, well, look at that, I told you Bitcoin was going to be cracked. I bet the CIA had the backdoor to it. You know you're going to see that. But hey, I guess it's also a sign of how early we are that people still think something like that is possible. So I don't know, but yeah, shout out to this guy. Glad he got his Bitcoin back. That's fantastic,
Yeah. I'll be honest though, I can't wait for the moment where you're being swallowed by a black hole and you're going to be like, Warren was right. They broke it. Just because I know you love her so much. Not as much as I love our time together on Fridays, though, Walker. It's always an absolute treat when you and I get to break down the madness and wrap up the week this way. You got any big plans of the weekend? Hanging out with the fam? Keeping it easy and breezy, I hope?
Hanging out with the fam, planting some trees, enjoying some time in the sunshine. Should be a good time. How about you?
That does sound like a good time. Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll play some golf or get out there. I don't know. It's a beautiful day out there. So, get out there, touch some grass, get away from the screens for a bit, do the thing. That sounds like a good plan for both of us. And I'll be looking forward to jumping back in the mix with you again next week, Walker. It's always a treat.
Likewise, Hank. Have a great weekend.
You as well. And everyone out there, thanks for watching today. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. RoxomTV, RoxomTV News, me and Walker. You can find us both on X and all the websites. And we'll see you boys and girls for more next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice weekend.